Hi, I'm Krutika, and today's conversation is with Sonia. How often do we find ourselves following the path that's expected of us, making choices we didn't fully choose simply because that's what society, culture, or tradition says we should do? Sometimes we don't even realise we're doing it, and we just keep moving forward, unaware of whether the life we're living is truly ours. But what happens when you pause and you start to question it all? When healing, self discovery, and spirituality begin to pull you in a new direction and one that challenges the old rules? Well, that's exactly the journey Sonia found herself on. In this episode, we talk about her decision to separate from a relationship that spanned over 2 decades, a separation that was mutual, respectful, and intentional. But in the Indian community, even an amicable ending can be met with raised eyebrows, judgment, and whispers. Sonia chose to confront all of this head on. Her story is one of quiet courage, deep reflection, and transformation. From her earlier years in Zambia to living apart from her parents during her formative teens to redefining what relationships, family, and spirituality mean to her now. Sonia's journey is full of wisdom and inspiration, and I'm in awe of the resilience and strength that she carries. Sonia, so lovely to have you on my podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. Now, Sonia, I know we've had a telephone conversation and we've had our introductions, but I'm conscious that our listeners won't know much about you. So I guess I'll just start from the very top. Could you
Mhm.
tell us, who is Sonia?
Interesting. I did think about this, and I think everyone is probably expecting a name, an age, whether I'm a mom or whether I'm married or whether I'm separated, something that defines. And I think I'd like to kind of portray this slightly differently to say that I'm a soul just trying to figure out who Sonia is. And I'm on this journey. I think all throughout life, I've hated to be defined. I've disliked it. So I'll always give an answer that someone would kind of think about twice on. So, yeah, who is Sonia? Let's find out.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you've said that you're a soul figuring out what journey you're on. Because do you know what? Actually, I'm pretty sure on my TikTok page and my Instagram page, I'm like still figuring life out. That's what I have under my handle because I honestly don't have it figured out. So thank you so much for saying that and validating also how I feel. So I love that. Now, let's think a little bit about your sort of earlier years and your childhood. Could you paint us a picture about what life was like for a young Sonia?
Right, for a young Sonia, interesting. I'm an East African Asian, again, in that kind of category of East African Asian. I was born in Zambia, a bit of a rarity. But my dad moved to Zambia, and I was the third daughter to my parents. So I was born in 1968 in Lusaka, which now that I look at life now, I think that's really cool. I think it's really cool. I was kind of born into nature, into wildlife. It was from 0 to 10, 11. It was a pretty amazing kind of setup. So I experienced the outdoors, I experienced nature, experienced all the elements of the earth. My hobbies were kind of cycling and climbing trees and picking fruits and you know looking at butterflies and dragonflies and all the things that we feel that we have to go out there to instill now with our kids. I actually had it on our doorstep. Then my parents shifted over to the UK, and that's where my life changed drastically. So from having been looked after, been nurtured, been cared for, I was suddenly brought here, and it was kind of an abrupt end to a very different beginning because I came here in the late 70s. I experienced quite a lot of racism in school, and bullying, etc. Sometimes I talk about it, sometimes I don't, but I think how it's portrayed now and what we experienced was very different because we didn't have a voice then. So we just had to be quiet. So my school days in England weren't great. And for me, my parents were back in Zambia. They decided to go back to Zambia and they left me here to study. So the young Sonia grew herself up. So from 11 till I was an adult, 18, I grew myself up. Hence,
Wow.
that shaped me as an adult.
That is so fascinating, Sonia. And just to, I'm so sorry to interrupt you there. The reason I'm just amazed is because that is so resonant with my childhood. So
Mm-hmm.
I moved from India to this country when I was 6 years old, and my parents sent me here to the UK very much for education as well and a better sort of future. And I grew up with my kaka and kaki, so my uncle and
Yes.
aunts,
Yeah.
and up until the age of 18 I was here, and it was only when I turned 18 that they decided to move as well, so something I can relate to as well.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
it's nice to meet someone who understands, because often people, as you grow up into an adult, you have habits and ways of doing things, but you don't really understand where that came from. And I think that's partly because you had to grow yourself up. I had to become assertive. I had to put myself out there. So you develop these kind of ways of coping. And I wouldn't say they're all good. Like, for example, I don't like to move. I've been in my home for the last 30 years. But because I moved a lot when I was a child, for me, moving correlates to uncertainty. Whereas some people love moving, they think it's great because, you're growing. So we all have our different ways of kind of looking at the same thing. But in this day and age, it would be called neglect, and social services will be on your
I know.
doorstep.
Well, this is it, right? This is exactly it. And it's funny because I moved around as well between different Gaga's houses,
Yes.
and
And they have
I
different ways.
they do, yeah, yeah. And I absolutely loved that aspect of my childhood. To be honest, I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I didn't have that. But at the
Mhm.
same time, that point that you mentioned about certain habits and certain things that you do, which you only unpick in your adult life. I mean, you mentioned
Yes.
you had to be assertive. For
Yes.
me, it was quite the opposite, actually. I found myself seeking validation and feeling like I'm good enough through my grades, and I'm only unpicking that. So I really worked hard at school because I was like, I had to, because I've been given this opportunity. And so for me, getting those A's and A stars, which, not bragging, I did, like that was part of me thinking, right, I'm getting that validation from my
Yes.
parents and from those around me. And it's only in my adult years that I've realized I don't need to be perfect to
No.
feel okay with myself. So yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
unfortunately, when I came here when I was 11, at 12, I got diagnosed with TB. So I had to go through 18 months of treatment by myself. Because in between, I would go back to visit my parents, but I had to go through treatment. So I missed a big chunk of school. So I kind of ended up being a disappointment as well. But it wasn't only to my parents, but it's actually to myself. So I think throughout my life, I've always lived with the fact that I'm not good enough. That has always come through into my jobs where my managers have said, "Oh, Sonia, you can do so much better than this. You could do this." I'm like, really? So even in later on in years, those little doubts are always there. They're embedded into you. They're in your psyche, and that's where the real work comes, because you have to keep your affirmations going to say, I can do this. I'm good at this. And I think that would probably be the biggest things that's held me back throughout life. Until I'm in there and I'm flourishing, then I think, oh, I can do it.
I don't know if you can see through the blurred screen. You probably can't. But I've got a quote just behind me that says, "It always seems impossible until it is done." Because positive affirmations for me are everything. Like, I have a lot of self doubt in certain things that I do as well. And it takes a lot for me to kind of unlearn that negative self talk. And I'm resonating with it completely.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I feel like we could just go down this particular
This
topic, and
part,
it's
yeah.
this particular topic. But I know, Sonia, from our earlier conversation, something we're gonna come on to touch on is the separation that you've recently experienced from your
Mhm.
partner. So I guess let's start from, what age did you get married? How did you meet your partner? And what was married life like for you?
Right. So I think most people in my age category would know that as soon as you were 18, 19, parents would be on your case. They'd be basically, right, we need to start showing you guys, and, that kind of thing. And then there was always that constant barrage of so-and-so's daughters got married, or so-and-so's daughters found this person, they're educated, they've gone abroad, they've done this. So you have this constant kind of background noise going on. But there was still glimpses of me that knew that I was kind of slightly different. So I was a bit of a rebel. And I was a bit defiant, and I was getting out when I shouldn't have. And I was just discovering myself at that age. And I did have a boyfriend, but he didn't fit the right category. So we knew, my ex-boyfriend and I at the time knew that because our differences in religion, that we would never have been able to be together. So that went on for a couple of years, and then eventually we had to call it a day. That was the time when I was really pushed on. So I was like 22, 23, and that's when the pressure started coming. I kind of decided to be different. I thought, I'm just going to find my person myself. Because they'd showed me a few guys, and I was like, how can you just go into a room, have a 10-second interview, and they're like, yeah, we'll marry you? How does that even happen? And it was happening, right, in those days. And nobody knew any different because you weren't allowed to date, you weren't allowed to live together. None of the changes that have come through today. So I then decided that, I'd hang out, at the cool areas to see if I could find someone. So I actually met my ex at Traveller's Rest, which people my age who live in Harrow know that that's where all the gangs used to come down, and we used to hang out on a Friday, Saturday for drinks and stuff. And that's where I met him. And I'm sure he felt the same way, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying. We kind of fit the right boxes for each other. I'm a Patel, here's a Patel, the village. Everything was just ticking boxes. And every time, it's like a little game, isn't it? Every time the tick box comes, you think, bing, all the criteria met except one or two things. And then before my parents could put pressure elsewhere, I just said, I found someone. We're figuring it out. And we figured it out. So we didn't have the get down on one knee, I'm going to propose to you. I don't think it happened that way all those years ago. You just literally communicated, this feels good, this looks good. Let's do what everyone else is doing, because all our friends were getting married that year or the year after. So I think we just got on the train and did what everyone else was doing. So we just let our families know that we'd like to get married, and then literally engaged at 24, married at 25.
Wow. And that's very young.
We bought a house at 26. I had my daughter at 27. So by 30, I'd gone through these major, major rites of passage, which now I know the young adult generation now are taking their time about it. And I think it's really great because they're on their journey of self-discovery, but at the same time, they're seeing what fits in with them. When my ex and I got together, and as we kind of progressed through the relationship and eventually got married, it was from a place of love. And at the time, it was a very loving decision. And also when we had our daughters, they were from a place of love as well. In between that, I was still growing into an adult. So there's a lot of things I didn't understand, and there's a lot of things I wouldn't conform to. So, I had to wear saris, had to go to family functions, had to go to wedding after wedding. And I think because I was a little bit outspoken, it wasn't always welcomed. And I always felt my ex and I, that we had to do an equal sharing, kind of marriage. So when we had our daughter, I'd be like, you need to help as well. You need to do this as well. Because, if I'm not around or something happens, you need to take responsibility. So maybe I was a little bit beyond my years then, because I defied everyone and I was like, no, he's got to help. But what I did with both our daughters was a blessing, because I think that's encouraged and nurtured a really beautiful relationship between them and their dad, because he was involved. So we figured a lot of things out, but we still had a lot of pressure from outside. And I think it's the external pressure in Asian society that we take on board. We seep it through, and that's where our validation comes. That's where we feel that, the likes come from. Whereas now we have Instagram and we have Facebook likes, but at that time we wanted to be liked by family. We wanted to be told that you were the good daughter-in-law, that you got up and you cooked the food and you did that. I was a useless cook. My mum told my mother-in-law, sadly she's passed away, but my mum told my mother-in-law, she goes, Sonia can't cook. If you think she's going to cook that much rotli, then, you've got another thing coming. She's like, no problem, no problem. And then obviously afterwards, it was a big problem. So there was lots of things I couldn't do, but I still beat myself up about it. And I think when you're in a young marriage and a young relationship, I think you focus so much about trying to belong and trying to validate and do things the right way. And I was very sensitive. I've always been a sensitive, so I could pick up on things. So I knew when someone didn't like me. I knew when someone was being mean. So I'd be like, why are you all like that? Why can't you just be kind? I'm new to this, love me, give me a hug. But I think in Indian society, as much as we have spirituality, religion, we have so much knowledge dating back into centuries, we can sometimes portray really awful sides of us. And when our families get together, instead of being harmonious and really caring and saying, you know what, none of us got this right, we actually do a good job of making it worse for the next generation, especially women. Like, we were the first to get married out of all his cousins. So all the new daughter-in-laws that came in, I felt that I developed a friendship with them, all of them. I'd all go up to them, give them a hug, like kind of be really calm and peaceful to say, you know what, you're new to this, but you'll figure it out. But one thing I have learned is all the other ones experience kind of same similar things to me. So that's when I realized it's not personal. It's just them. But it took me a long time to figure that out. I think by the time I figured that out, we were a little bit broken because I felt the support from my ex, and we weren't supporting each other enough. We didn't know how to support each other. We were children. So I think that's one of been my biggest kind of epiphanies about marriage, and what I read about all the time is it's not you, it's just what's going on out there. And that's kind of the early years of marriage were kind of very, very kind of busy around all you're trying to navigate. And also the fact that you had to look after your in-laws, you had to be the breadwinners and things. We had a lot of pressure around that. So I was the red herring. We bought a house. It's like, how dare you move out?
Yeah. Because actually, that was one of the things I'd noted earlier. You mentioned you're quite an assertive character and you sort of do you, which is so empowering and it's fantastic to hear. And you also mentioned the kind of way that when your daughter was born, you wanted your husband to be involved, which at that time wasn't a thing. I mean, how was your then husband at the time's reaction to that? And you've mentioned he took to it really well, but, was he okay doing that at the time?
Absolutely.
Were there challenges
fine.
on that?
Absolutely fine. So even then, in those days, men didn't cook. I couldn't cook, so he had to help me. He didn't like Indian food, so that was a blessing. And I was a little bit resistant because I was kind of veering more towards vegetarianism. He was kind of more towards a meat eater. And I'd be like, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. And then hung up that towel. But I think because he was better at it, we just let him get on with it. And both my daughters were colic. They never slept for 16 weeks, so we needed each other. And we winged our way through a lot of stuff. But when he was like, okay, I'm going to take the little one out here and I'm going to get, feed her this, or I'm going to do that, or I'd be at work and he'd pick up, my younger one. We were very flexible like that. And I'm so glad, because those early years are so important. And I think that's taken them to where they are now with their relationship with their dad. Even though it didn't go well in the community, what the community did, like, why is he cleaning the house? Or why would he be doing laundry? Because I think it's very stereotypical for women to be doing all those things. And I wasn't great at it. And I took all the help I could get. Honestly, both my daughters were looked after by their grandparents, and they'd go off and I'd be like, fine, you can have them, because I was figuring it out myself. I knew how to love them, but I didn't know how to navigate through all the other things, which I think young parents now can do, because they've set them so they're prepared, and plus I had severe postnatal. So I had to figure my way through that. It wasn't acknowledged then. So I think, when you grow yourself up, you find ways of coping. I've always been one of those that I get up and I show up. I get up and I show up.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned that kind of being wired in your psyche that, get up and just go. And I wonder if that's a sort of a cultural thing as well, and whether it comes down to kind of that immigrant mentality as well. A lot of Indians have that. They're experiencing something, and you're great. You've taken the time to process that, but I don't think everyone does. Like, and I see it, like, even with, like, my mum and the older women around me, they tend to just brush things under the carpet and let's just get on with it. It's that sort of
yes.
mentality.
I tend to sit with things when I get time. I tend to sit with things. And something I didn't mention, in my early childhood, when I first came to this country, I lived with my grandfather. And my grandfather was psychic, and he was palmist, and he was a mystic. And I was introduced to all of this, and I was absolutely fascinated by it. Absolutely fascinated. And all the spirituality that you see now on TikTok and Instagram, I had an experience of that from like the late 70s into the 80s. So a lot of it I'd already experienced. I was able to use those tools that my grandfather had imparted on me, and then on my own healing journey to then kind of sit with, understanding, through healing, through forgiveness, to kind of move through all the challenges that I have gone through. And I think because I put it out there to the universe, I've had the help that comes through. So I went on in my kind of early 40s to have a mentor who was a psychic, to take me on my own healing journey. And, I kind of work as a spiritual healer now myself. But that's all come through my lineage. Because if we sit with something for too long without understanding it and trying to figure out why it's happening, it will keep happening again and again. That's one of the laws of karma.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I mean, just to kind of circle back to a couple of things you sort of mentioned earlier. Obviously, you got married really young. You had a lot of these life-changing milestones that happened in such a short space of time. You also alluded to the fact that sometimes it's not you, it's what's around you.
Yes.
And ultimately, over the years, your partner and yourself, you've been together, you were married, was it 25 plus?
We were married 25 plus years. I've just realised I didn't even answer your question. But I can put some insight into that. My husband was working long hours. He was doing 2 shifts, and I should say my ex. And, it was okay to do that. We had no choice. I went back to work after both my daughters were 12 weeks old. I went back to work full time because that's what we did in those days. He actually got employed by Google through a takeover, and he was one of the young Googlers, in that era. And basically, it was just work for him. It was work for me. And I think that's something that now that you look back in retrospect, you look at the fact that it's not only the marriage, we as individuals are changing. If you're not conforming, we are changing. And if we're not connecting to our change and seeing each other, we don't see each other. We don't see people, right? So if we don't have the time and space and the momentum to understand and feel and converse and have that space, then what happens? Because life is just taking over. Even though there's a lot of respect in each other, I think, as you're growing up, you grow apart sometimes. And again, in Asian communities, we don't communicate. But something, I guess, in both of us wasn't working, but we just weren't able to sit there and unpack it all. I think slowly, sometimes sadness, anger, disappointment, nagging creeps through, and parts of you come through which you look at and you think, that's not me. Why am I doing that? And I became that person and I didn't like it. It brought a fearful side of me out, which is what's going to happen now. How are we going to manage? Our daughters are going to university. And then the elephant got bigger and bigger. And then we started talking about the elephant. And we were like, okay, there had to be an analogy. So we were discussing the elephant. And it was like, well, what can we do? Because it's suffocating you, it's suffocating me. And then we had to navigate through the challenge, the sadness, the bitterness, the anger, all of those emotions were coming up. It was like, what do we do? Because ultimately it's going to sit on both of us and we're both going to suffocate. So we're trying to look after our daughters, we're trying to look after our family, we're trying to look after our outer circle of what other people are going to say or think. And then we just had to come to a decision that, look, let's just give each other some breathing space and just kind of separate. But COVID came. And COVID took us into a point where we couldn't give each other that space and we were in each other's space even more. So we had to navigate through that as well. But you know what? In hindsight, just being in it was actually a blessing in disguise because we couldn't make any decisions. And I think then the government was bringing out the law where you could do it online yourself. You could go through a divorce online yourself. So they were changing the law. You didn't have to cite anything. Everything was changing. So I said, look, let's just wait a while. Let's go through this. We mutually came to a decision, even though it was difficult. And I think I then even immersed myself more onto my personal journey. So where things would come up for me, I would sit with it and not look at it as a blame game. And look at it, well, how can we look at this to say, how can we do it differently? And I did an online Divorce 101 course with Bhavna Raja. And it was during COVID, it was all on Zoom, and I empowered myself. So basically, I did the course, I empowered myself, and she's an amazing woman. She just empowered, and she gave me loads and loads of tools to do things differently. So we navigated it really, really differently, holistically, spiritually, whichever way you use it. but we did it as a family. So as we were moving through this, I was using more empowering tools as to more, other ways. Well, someone else will take them to the cleaners or do this, which is
That
what
sort of hostile approach,
that
isn't it?
hostile
Hostile
approach.
approach, yeah.
So things were not always good, but I just picked my battles. There were really sad days and there were really okay days, but we just stuck to them. And we've now navigated through a situation now where I am redefining and recreating what a post marriage relationship can look like. And I don't like to use the D word all the time. And when people say to us, well, people have asked me, how did you do it? We're in unhappy marriages. How did you do it? And it's like, you have to start somewhere, but you have to be honest with yourself. It's terrifying, don't get me wrong. It's absolutely terrifying because your heart tells you, your soul tells you you're making the right choice, but your head is it's just noise going off because your head knows that it's fear. How are you going to do all this? Because you're losing all the comforts that you've got of being in a relationship.
And it takes a lot of bravery and courage to even just acknowledge that something isn't right in a relationship. And
yes,
Sonia, the fact that you and your partner face that head on. And I know initially there wasn't that kind of, you guys were both, perhaps if I could use the word, you were maybe building up resentment because there were unspoken things. But then when you got to that point of both of you realizing, hang on a minute, something's not right.
And none of us know. We don't know. You can't give it a time span. Again, people want you to give it a time span. People want to move on, or I didn't tell my mum for a long time. I was so scared. All these fears built within you. And do you know what? My ex ended up telling my parents with me sat there. I was a chicken.
How did they react?
Not great, not great. And, their sadness was different, but I think you have to separate yourself from others to you. Because I think as Asian women, there's too much about conforming, the validation, the others. And what's really beautiful now is we're creating something very different as a family. And, we still socialize, we communicate, we help each other out, but we're just more accepting and more open. And it feels amazing and people want to be around us. I think for me, I really wanted to set my girls an example that, do you know what? It's sad what's happened and we can navigate it through it differently. But you are going to be going into relationships. I don't want you looking back and saying, we knew our parents weren't really 100%, but you know what? They just got on with it and they were a bit miserable. And it's just, why? Why should we have to put the next generation through that?
Yeah. Was there an element of you that feared the judgment and this sort of, how it is in the Indian community when someone goes through something like this, you have like the gossip and, you have that judgment.
Yes,
how have
100%.
you sort of navigated that?
It's not been easy at all because where you would have thought certain family members would have come forthcoming, I think they don't like, they find, relationship breakups, all people find it very uncomfortable. All people need to ask is, what can I do for you? This must be really challenging for you or sad for you. What can I do for you? I only realized I was going through grief, like post, and I was thinking, why am I feeling all these emotions? I was feeling grief. I needed grief therapy. I needed someone to sit down and go talk through the loss with me. I think some of my key people, I went to them and I said to them, look, I'm going through this situation. I'm going to turn to you for help. So I asked for help.
Oh, well done.
Instead of burying things and not talking about certain people, I asked for help. I actually said, I'm really going to need you over the next 12 months. If I send you an SOS, I need you. So that was really lovely for me because certain people came through, certain people didn't. It was a disappointment with some because they're like, yeah, we're here, but they weren't. I think the universe always has a plan if you put it out there. If you ask and it's given. So I asked and I got myself a little community. And also because I got a lot of help from Bhavna, when we finished, we set up a group called Connect and Rise. But it's just all about coming together and asking for help. And through asking for help, things will pass. And I think personal health, your emotional health, your physical health is so important because it was only after that I ended up with a real bad bout of shingles way down the line because your immune system begins to function less and less. So wherever you are in your life, whatever challenge you're going through, because there's other couple of challenges I've been through where even with my work, etc., bullying portrayed all the way down through, with the different decades of my life. You have to wake up to the fact that, okay, this has happened to me, but what's my cutoff point? And now I need to become the victor to this. So I don't want to let this story define me. I need to move through this, beyond this, and what has become of me now. And that's where I guess the word survivors come, the word victors come, and when people say to me, how are what are you now? It's, well, look at me now. My life defines, how you can overcome challenges, because my life is my happiness. So whatever I'm doing, my soul is doing it with happiness.
Could I just ask you, I know you've mentioned some of the stuff that you've done in terms of your spiritual journey, that the healing. Could you talk to us a little bit more about any other tools and strategies that you've adopted to help you navigate this particular time in your life?
Yeah, I think continue to build your community. Things are different, having gone through the grief and loss, because, you lose friends along the way, things change, family changes, everything shifts. But I've continued down my more holistic path. So I walk every day. So I walk for mental health. So every day I walk at least an hour. That's been my savior. Nature's been my savior. Travel's been my savior. I used to be a great believer of shelf help. I've read every book that's out there. I've got a great library of books.
Do you have a favourite, Sonia, that you could recommend?
Yeah, I think Top 5 Regrets of Dying. That's an
Is that the
amazing
one
book.
written by a nurse who's...
Yes, yes.
Yes, is that the one? Oh,
Yes,
I've
Top
been
5
meaning to
Regrets of
read that.
Dying. Rules of Life, Richard Templar. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. The 7 Laws of Spiritual Success. I mean, there's so many books that are out there, but I think the Top 5 Regrets of Dying has been a key one for me, because, when you really think about regret, that's when it pushes you to the next level. That's when it pushes you to the next level. And then on my spiritual journey, I've listened to like kind of spiritual podcasts of, the faith I have. So, thank God Spotify came out, and I just, podcasted my way through everything whilst walking. When you do feel sad and you are in that victim phase or poor me phase, the first person we let down is ourselves. Lots of self-love. What does self-love look like? And I've been on a journey of discovery of what my self-love looks like for me. Do more of that. Yoga, breathing, gardening.
I love yoga, yeah.
All these things that I guess people say I don't get time for. Even if I go and pick out 10 weeds, I mowed the lawn like for 2 years.
I've heard that actually stepping barefoot on the grass is meant to be like good for you or something like that.
Yeah, because
I don't
Mother
know.
Earth takes all the negativity, and then she absorbs everything, and then you just turn it into positivity, and you put it all out back into the universe. So I think just finding nature and gratitude, when you wake up, I'm so grateful. With gratitude, more comes our way. And that's where I think I'm more living in the present now. I'm not living for I think about my pension, but I'm not really living for my pension. I don't know. Nobody knows.
Yeah, and it's that living in the present which can often be the hardest bit as well, isn't it? Because often your thoughts go to the future or to the past, and it's kind of just, yeah.
It's a daily exercise.
It's a daily
exercise.
Yeah,
And things didn't work out for me, and it's sad. Sometimes I look at others and I think, oh, it would be lovely to have a relationship like that. I don't know. The older I get, do I really want what we call the silver surfers or something? I don't know what we call now when you're dating in your 50s or 60s or whatever you are. But women are redefining what relationships really mean for them. And do we want to really take on someone else full time? Are we happy where we are? And what for me now, I think the way I'm doing things, what does it look like for me? What does it look like for my family? And as long as that works, that's my main point of focus. And I do ask my daughters, how am I doing? Am I better at this? It's, kind of, have I changed?
incredible.
I ask for feedback.
That's fantastic. The fact that you even ask your children for feedback. I don't know any adult that has done that. I certainly can't think of anyone. So that's fantastic.
I said, am I doing that again? They're like, yes, you are, Mum. I said, okay, then, sorry.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, you touched on dating earlier, and if it's not too personal to ask, would you consider dating anyone?
I would, not yet. Definitely would. How I define it, how other people would define it, would be very different for me. Because I think what's been really lovely is, since I've had some breathing space, all the things that I would have felt that would have rescued me isn't going to rescue me. Because I think a lot of me when I was younger needed to be rescued. And that's when a partner came in, and you know what, they took over and I didn't have to worry about certain things. It was a comfort thing. Whereas now I'm very, very aware of I and quite rightly so, women are they're allowed to go out there, find their sexuality, just be free enough to just go and be on an adventure. Don't really think that's been for me. So I know what works for me and what doesn't. And I think what would be really lovely now is, I don't think I would look at it dating. I would look at it as, what does a companion look like for me? And how does that fit into my life? Dating would mean that you're wanting to move through a partnership where you would possibly end up living together. Are you following the same footsteps as you did before? But I want new footprints, and I want to redefine things. And I want to say that it's okay maybe to have a friend or a companion and see what works and see where that takes me.
And I love that you've actually offered me a slightly different perspective as well, this idea of companionship and realizing that, there are different ways of kind of viewing a relationship.
I'd love to be friends with someone who enjoys the same reading, enjoys walking, enjoys, there's an element of common interest, but also I'm learning something different. And also when you're later on in life, you are picking up on other people's trauma, other people's baggage, their relationships or whatever, or not. They've got different dreams and aspirations. And because I'm very aware, I don't just want to be in something because it fills a gap. Because now I'd rather have less, and that's the next journey. My journey now is to declutter, and to let go. That's my key word, to let go. What can I let go that no longer serves me?
I love that your next journey is just wanting to cleanse, let go, and you mentioned it earlier, you're still figuring things out. So I feel like we've sort of come full circle to kind of say,
yes,
and it's okay to figure it out.
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. Sonia, I feel I could talk to you for a lot longer. You have so much to share, so much wisdom, so much advice, so much life experiences as well. Any sort of final remarks?
Oh my gosh, I felt like I've just said so much, but I would always say to anyone out there, it doesn't matter where you are, who you are, how old you are, it's okay. Just if you don't have anyone to talk to the universe. And, once you put it out there, oh my God, magic happens. Absolute magic happens. People appear, circumstances change. No matter what challenge you're going through out there, the moment you set the intention that you're going to move almost from being a victim and in denial to, a soul that, wants a solution, so much will appear for you. I have not done this alone, whether it's God, whether it's the universe, and I have had the most amazing, amazing people in my life who have stood by me through thick and thin. Big heartfelt thanks to my spiritual mentor, Dennis McKenzie, whom has just supported me spiritually, on my growth, and has pushed me through my challenges to be the best version of myself. And he still continues to support me to this day. My daughters have been my strength, and also my ex, who I call my ex-friend now. He continues to support me, and together they all kind of help me to be the best version of me. Outside of that, my team of human angels who've been absolutely unconditionally supportive on my journey and have always been there through dark and light. I'd just like to say, you know who you are. I'm really sorry I can't name you, but when you get this podcast, it will be with a little tag called My Human Angel. Thank you. Seek those amazing people, seek those amazing souls, and they will appear for you.
Thank you so much, Sonia, for coming on my podcast. That's an absolutely incredible note to end on. Thank you for listening to this episode of Journeys with Krutika. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and share. I'd love for you to hit the follow button wherever you get your podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you have a journey that you want to share, email me at journeyswithkrutika@gmail.com or reach out via my socials. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Just search Journeys with Krutika, because your journey is extraordinary.